Have you heard of Dutch oven cooking but figured it's too tricky or just for hardcore campers? Trust me, it's not. If you've ever lost power for days, been roped into a scout cookout, or just want to know how to make a solid meal without a kitchen, this skill can be a real lifesaver. It's easier than it looks, and you don't need fancy gear, just some coals, a Dutch oven, and a little know-how. You'll be surprised how quickly it turns into something fun, useful, and pretty delicious. Welcome to Nancy's Homestyle Kitchen, where I show you how to cook real food that feels like home with simple steps, budget-friendly ingredients, and no pressure to get it perfect. Let's go over the basics. One of the most exciting things about Dutch oven cooking is how versatile it is. If you can cook it in your oven or on your stovetop at home, chances are you can cook it in a Dutch oven outdoors. You can cook everything from soups and stews to baked goods, full dinners. The possibilities are wide open, and with just a little practice and some good heat control, you can achieve a delicious dish. So let's go over some of the Dutch oven sizes. This is a 12-inch classic Dutch oven. So 12-inch meaning the lid is a 12-inch diameter, and this is actually 6 quarts in capacity. So you're gonna come across Dutch ovens in various sizes. The most common are a 10-inch diameter and a 12-inch diameter. This one is the 12-inch, and it is also shallow. They have Dutch ovens that are deeper, and they tend to be on the larger size. They go up to 14 and 16 inches. The 12-inch Dutch oven is one of the most common sizes, as recipes that call for cooking in a 9x13 can be easily adapted to the Dutch oven. This size is great for main dishes and desserts. They run about $70 to $75. 10-inch Dutch ovens are great for things like beans, rolls, cobblers, and 8-inch ovens are good for vegetables and smaller servings. The 12-inch deep and larger ovens can accommodate recipes for roasting birds, large roasts, potatoes, and enough to feed a crowd. Dutch ovens have legs to allow for briquettes or coals to be placed underneath, as well as a lip around the lid to hold the coals and prevent your ash from falling into your food when the lid is removed. You want to choose one with a lid that doesn't rock back and forth when you press around the edges. You may need to check a few before you buy. Mine actually slightly rocks a little bit, but I found it has a good seal, and quite honestly, it was the best one that I could find at the store at the time. So there are also deluxe Dutch ovens that have a different type of a lid that can be used as a griddle or a skillet, and they're sold in 10, 12, and 14-inch sizes. So let's talk about seasoning. Most new Dutch ovens come pre-seasoned and ready to use. But if yours needs a refresh or you're working with bare cast iron, you can season it yourself. You start by coating the entire pot and the lid, both outside and inside, with a very thin layer of oil. You can use vegetable oil or olive oil. Place the oven and the lid upside down on the top rack of your kitchen oven. And I put a baking sheet or a piece of foil on the bottom rack to catch any oil drops. And then go ahead and bake that at 350 for 30 minutes. Increase the temperature to 400 for 30 minutes. And finally up to 450 degrees for another 30 minutes. Then you simply just turn off your oven, let it naturally cool down. Don't open the door, and keep your Dutch oven and your lid in there and let it cool naturally. And then you can take it out, wipe it out, and you're ready to go. So there are many resources available online or YouTube to help you achieve a great seasoning. It's one of those things when you're working with cast iron, you do kind of have to learn about it and get it right so your food doesn't stick and it comes out great. But really, once you learn the basics, they're pretty easy to care for. So as far as cleaning and care is concerned, after cooking, let your Dutch oven cool completely, and you don't want to pour cold water into a hot Dutch oven because the sudden change in temperature can cause it to crack. So once it's cooled down, wipe out any leftover food, or you could use a pan scraper to gently remove anything that is stuck on. Wash it in hot water. There is no soap needed, and be sure to dry it thoroughly. And to prevent any rust, and keep the seasoning in good shape, I just apply a thin layer of oil again with a paper towel, wipe it out. They also have some cast iron conditioners that you can buy and use. The choice is up to you. But what I do to store it is just fold a couple of paper towels and put them under the lid so there is a gap, and it keeps it dry and it doesn't turn sticky after it's been stored for a little bit. So here are a few more tips. You never want to store your Dutch oven with the lid sealed tight. It needs air circulation to avoid moisture buildup and rust. If rust appears, it could be scrubbed off with steel wool and then reseason the oven in your oven, as I just described the process. And then always avoid harsh detergents, metal scouring pads, and dishwashers because they will strip the seasoning. One other thing I did want to mention about this oven is you might notice there is a hole on the side. Some of them come with the hole and some of them don't. But the hole on the side lines up to the hole in the lid. So if you have a recipe that you need some of the steam to escape, you would line those up, and that's where the steam can escape while you're cooking in your Dutch oven. Before me, I have the tools that you will need to cook in the Dutch oven. Some of them are optional. I'm going to let you know which ones are absolutely necessary. So to start with, of course, you need a camp Dutch oven and charcoal. So it's recommended to use Kingsford charcoal. You don't want any of the Matchlight or generic charcoals because they tend to not hold the heat as long as you need, and you'll just end up preparing more charcoal along the way to keep your fire going. You do need a charcoal chimney starter with 3 to 4 pieces of newspaper. I have put my AARP bulletin in the bottom of this because I don't need to be reminded how old I am. I have a little metal pan. I got this at Tractor Supply. It's just in the feed section, so I think they use these for like chicken feed or sheep. But this is just a nice pan to have on the ground where I could put my newspaper in the bottom, have the chimney here. I can fill it up with the charcoal and then go ahead and light it and get the charcoals going. So some of you who barbecue may already have most of these products at home. You do need a lid lifter. So this is a little hook. They come in different types. Some of them have like a squeeze where it will lock in, but it basically hooks under the lid and lifts it up, because when it's hot, and if you have some gloves, like I'm going to show you here in a minute, it's really hard to kind of get down into this lid and lift it up. Whereas if you have the lid lifter, you can simply lift it up. You can take it and put it on a lid stand, which is something else you must have, because if you're tending to the food that's cooking in here, you want somewhere clean to place your lid out of the way while you tend to your food, and then you'll pick it back up and stick it back onto your Dutch oven. Another reason this is good is because when you're cooking during the process, and I'll show you this when we go outside and cook, is about every 10 to 15 minutes, you want to turn your lid a quarter of the way to a third of the way one way, and you want to lift up your Dutch oven, and you want to rotate it as well in the opposite direction. So that way we're kind of rotating the heat, and because sometimes you might have a bunch of coals under one side that you don't realize is actually hotter than the other. So by rotating the Dutch oven and the lid around in opposite directions, you're gonna kind of evenly distribute that heat during the cooking process. So these are called trivets, and my husband made these with some horseshoes. So he made a short one, and then down here I have a taller one. And these are good, so after you get comfortable with cooking with briquettes, go ahead and build a fire and use some hot coals from a wood fire, and you can just set the Dutch oven directly on the trivet like this and put your wood coals down here, and now you have 2 different elevations, so you can kind of work with the temperature of cooking in your Dutch oven. Welding gloves from Harbor Freight, $7, must have. This comes in really handy. It's just a natural whisk broom. So if you get a lot of ashes on the top of your lid, you can sweep them off. You need tongs to grab your charcoal out and place them under your Dutch oven. And this is the pan scraper that I was talking about during the care and cleaning portion. This is really good to get inside and get around the edges to scrape out those bits so you're not using those metal abrasive products or destroying the seasoning in your pan. And finally, the last thing is Lodge sells some liners. And I have actually used this when I've made like a pineapple upside down cake. And it just made it where there was no carryover flavor from the Dutch oven. I don't know if there would be, but just to err on the side of caution and to additionally help from prevent sticking, I put the parchment paper in the bottom of the Dutch oven. So I think I've gone over everything. Now let's go outside, we'll get the coals going, and we'll start cooking. Today I'm using my regular camp stove as an elevated cooking surface. This is one option and it's a comfortable height. While I was going over the equipment, I forgot to mention the large feed pan. You can use 2 feed pans as an elevated cooking surface as well. Put 3 to 4 pieces of crumpled up newspaper in the bottom of the charcoal chimney and load up to the top with briquettes. Use more than your recipe and Dutch oven size call for because you will need to replenish along the way. Light the newspaper, and when the coals are hot and partially gray, you're ready to get cooking, approximately 15 minutes. You can't see it in the video, but the coals near the bottom of the chimney are ready to go. So I'm taking a few off the top and pouring the hot coals into my large feed pan. Since it's a bit breezy out here on my patio, I'm opting to use the feed pan as a windbreak. Using man-made windbreaks can help maintain even heat and prevent your coals from cooling too quickly. In cold weather, you may also need to add extra coals to keep the temperature steady. As you can see, I'm placing a good amount of coals around and under my pot so I can bump up the temp to brown the meat, veggies, and cook the chili. Any unused coals and coals that weren't ready are tossed back into the charcoal chimney. Be sure not to use all of your coals. If your recipe takes longer than an hour, you may need additional coals. If so, about 30 minutes into your cooking time, toss some new briquettes into the chimney to get those ready to help keep the heat consistent. This recipe takes an hour, so I won't need to prep additional coals. The chili recipe I'm using today was inspired by my dad. There was never a camping trip that didn't include his chili. So to the Dutch oven, I'm adding 1 pound of ground beef. I'm just going to stir that around. I'm checking the temperature with my hand. And then I'm going to add 1 medium yellow onion that has been chopped. And 1/2 of a red bell pepper that has been chopped. As I was cooking, I could tell that the pot wasn't hot enough, so I scooted the coals under the lip, and I'm adding some more hot coals to bring up that temperature. Now I'm adding 2 cloves of garlic that have been minced. And the spices that I just added are 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm also adding 1 28-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes that I have drained, and 1 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. Diced green chilies, and it wouldn't be my dad's chili without the ranch style beans. Now I'm just going to give that a stir, keep monitoring my fire, and making sure that this is going to simmer for about 30 minutes. Shortly after adding all the ingredients, I noticed the heat was uneven. I removed the Dutch oven to my trivet, checked the heat level with my hand, and rearranged the coals for better heat distribution. The more you cook with your Dutch oven, the more you'll notice drops in temperature, how to feel those by hand, and know when to add more coals. When frying or simmering food with the lid off, I find that adding coals more towards the center of the underside of the pot helps keep the heat up. We'll go over the different type of coal placement required for baking when we add the cornbread. The cornbread recipe I'm using is from Sally's Baking Addiction and will be linked in the description. I'm just placing it in an even layer on top of the chili. The coals left in the pan from cooking the chili are spent and not producing much heat, so I'm just pushing them to the side. Now we need to arrange the coals differently to create an oven to bake the cornbread. To bake the cornbread, I'm aiming for a temperature of 375 degrees, so I'm using 9 coals on the bottom and 18 on the top. A good rule of thumb for setting your starting temperature is to double the diameter of your Dutch oven to estimate how many total briquettes you'll need for roughly 325 degrees Fahrenheit. From that total, place about 1/3 of the coals underneath the oven and the other 2/3 on top. This arrangement helps create even oven-like heat for consistent cooking. I'll link a charcoal temperature chart in the description box for your reference. When placing your coals, it's best to focus the heat around the outer edge of the Dutch oven rather than directly in the center. On the bottom, arrange your coals in a ring just inside the oven's base, close enough to be fully under the pot, but not stacked in the middle. This allows the heat to rise up the sides and move inward, helping food cook more evenly. The same concept applies to the lid. Place the coals around the rim, avoiding the center where hot spots can form and lead to burning. If you need to adjust the temperature, you can fine-tune it by adding or removing coals. As a general guide, adding 2 briquettes will raise the cooking temperature by about 25 degrees Fahrenheit. This is especially helpful when outdoor temperatures drop or when your recipe calls for higher heat. To keep the heat evenly distributed, rotate the oven about 1/3 of a turn clockwise every 10 to 15 minutes or so, and turn the lid 1/3 of a turn in the opposite direction. This simple step helps prevent uneven cooking and scorching. All right, it is finished. The cornbread took 30 minutes to bake and I rotated it twice during the process. Let's go inside and do the taste test. So it's been just over an hour and we have a pot of homemade chili inspired from my dad's recipe with a cornbread topping. Now, the cornbread isn't as crispy as the cornbread that I normally get out of my regular oven, but it's definitely cooked through. And the chili is just nice and flavorful. And so let's take a bite. I'm gonna blow on it because it's hot. There is nothing better than chili and cornbread together. If this helped take the mystery out of Dutch oven cooking, give it a like and consider subscribing. It's a small click that helps a lot. That's a wrap for today. Whether you're learning for fun, prepping for a power outage, or just want to cook like a pioneer with modern groceries, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week with another easy homestyle recipe.